Welcome, everyone, and welcome back if you've joined us for a webinar before. My name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of the career experts here at FlexJobs. Today's webinar is titled Changing Careers. You've decided, now what's next? And our goal for this webinar is to provide some things to consider once you've determined the direction in which you want to go with your changing career. And this webinar is perfect for job seekers who have already decided they want to change careers and determined a new career goal, or even for those who are simply considering a change and want to make sure that they're well prepared before taking this next step in their career. While we're giving everyone a minute to get in and get settled, please feel free to share where you're joining us from today in the chat section. Before we dive in, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items. You are certainly welcome to take notes during today's presentation, but I want to let you know that this webinar will be recorded, and a link to the video as well as some resources discussed during the presentation will be sent out to you within a week or so to the email address you used to register for today's event. Please note that this presentation has been pre-recorded, but the Q&A portion that'll follow the presentation is going to be conducted live with one of our career experts. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, please make sure to put it in the Q&A section of Big Marker rather than the chat section. This really helps us keep track of questions in one place, and the Q&A section also allows you to click a thumbs up button if someone else has asked a question that you're interested in so that we can see which questions are the most popular. We probably won't be able to answer everyone's question today, but our hope is that you will still learn something helpful. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we're going to look at some ways that you can thoroughly research and understand your potential career change target or targets so that you're fully informed and prepared before launching your career change. Next, we're going to examine some ways that you can gain new skills and experience that can help make you a competitive candidate in your new field of interest. Then we'll focus on some tips and strategies to improve your job search methods. And then lastly, we'll finish out the webinar with our live audience Q&A with one of our career experts. All right, let's go ahead and start discussing our first topic, which is evaluating your career change plan. So before diving right into your career change, there are a few key things that you'll want to evaluate in order to determine how best to move forward. And the first thing that you want to evaluate is how you chose your new career path. Ideally, career changes should take place after a good amount of self-reflection and consideration of all your potential options. And you want to make sure that you've chosen a new path that will bring you the type of professional fulfillment that you're seeking and is also something that you're capable of successfully doing professionally. The next thing to consider is whether you are planning a significant change or simply transitioning to a different role in your current field. Considering this question is important because the answer to this question can impact the amount of time and effort that your career change might take. And that's not to dissuade you from making a pretty drastic change that might require more time and effort, but it is important to know what you're committing yourself to before trying to make that change. Next, you'll want to assess what skills, education, or experience you might potentially be missing. It's important to think about all the things that you potentially lack so that you can start to develop an action plan, which we'll discuss later, for how to possibly compensate for those deficits. Identifying the skills you need, credentials that could be required, or levels of experience that might be preferred can help you create an effective action plan to begin your new career. And then lastly, you want to evaluate what transferable skills you already possess that will be helpful in this new field. In the same way that you should know your deficits, you also want to know your strengths and the things that you're already bringing to the table. And really, no matter what career path you're trying to pursue, chances are good that you have at least some transferable skills, whether, soft skills or more technical skills that you'll want to identify and showcase to potential employers, leveraging them to help you make that career transition, and fully understanding what skills you already possess in comparison to what you might be lacking can help you understand how easy or how challenging your planned career change might be. On this slide, you'll see a screenshot from the website onnetonline.org. There are quite a few websites available like ONET where you can learn a lot of information about different careers. And chances are pretty good that you may have already used websites like this to help you determine what career changes you wanted to make. These types of websites can be extremely valuable in understanding the different intricacies of a vast array of roles out there, like the tasks and responsibilities they entail. Can also help you in determining the technical and transferable skills you might need for this role, and a wide range of other helpful information that you should be considering as you prepare to make your career change. Here's a screenshot from a website called careeronestop.org. And similar to ONET, Career One Stop can also help you to determine the type of education and training most commonly required for different roles. This type of information is important to research beforehand because the career in which you are trying to enter might have certain requirements that you need to fulfill before you can successfully make your change. If a particular job that you're considering requires a certain degree level or a specific type of license or certification, you definitely want to be aware of that ahead of time so that you can establish a plan for obtaining these qualifications. And on this slide, we'll talk about some other research methods that you can employ to help you with evaluating your career change plan. Keep in mind, conducting research is really helpful in making informed decisions as you transition to a new role. So in addition to websites like Career One Stop and ONET, it's also extremely helpful to review position descriptions for jobs that closely match your new career of choice. Position descriptions for jobs that you're hoping to pursue are a great way to determine what qualifications, skills, and experience you should have to make you a qualified candidate for these types of roles. You want to make sure that you understand your audience, your future audience. What are they seeking in potential candidates? Once you know that, you can then highlight these things, and that will help you make yourself a competitive candidate for these types of roles. And be sure to look carefully at whether certain qualifications are required versus preferred, and then also keep in mind the 60% rule. If you review a description and can confidently say that you have done or can do at least 60% of what is listed, then you can consider yourself a solid candidate for that role. Obviously, your chances will be higher if you're at the 70, 80, 90% range, but the 60% rule is a good baseline to use. Another good research method is to leverage different AI tools. There are different AI tools available like ChatGPT, which continues to be one of the most popular, and you can use them to aid you in your research. Using a simple prompt with ChatGPT like, what does a project manager do? Or what are the most important skills and qualifications needed to be a marketing coordinator, can give you a lot of helpful information to initiate your research. And then you can also ask ChatGPT more detailed follow-up questions about roles or industries that are of interest to you, as well as asking questions about specific companies that you might want to work for in the future. Informational interviews are also a great research method, especially if you already know someone in this type of a role. Conducting online research and reviewing position descriptions is great, but informational interviews can allow you to hear directly from people working in the types of roles that you're considering and help you gain even more practical insights into what your action plan should look like to help make this transition to a new career field. And asking questions of someone who has already pursued this career path can help you learn tips to streamline your efforts and help you avoid costly mistakes. And then you'll also want to consider your broader network. If you don't know anyone specifically who works in a role that you're considering, think about tapping into your network for a connection. People like former colleagues, family members, friends, alumni from the same college or university you went to, or maybe even people that you volunteered with, can help you gain connections to other people that can serve as valuable sources of information for you. All right, so after you have fully reviewed and evaluated your career change plan and you have a strong understanding of the types of skills, experience, and qualifications you might need to gain to make yourself competitive in this new type of role, you want to start thinking about ways to improve your marketability and chances of success in your new field. So hopefully through your thorough analysis and research of your potential career change plan, you were able to identify some goals to help you get to where you want to be. Once you have an understanding of what those goals might be, it's time to start developing an action plan to help you achieve those goals. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what can you do to make yourself more attractive to employers? If you are simply transitioning to a new career within your current field or moving into a very similar field, this can be as simple as, revising and reorganizing your resume to better emphasize the transferable skills you already possess that are highly relevant to your new roles of interest. If you're making a more drastic change in career, this can be a bit more complex, like applying to and completing degree programs or certification courses. But either way, you want to have a good idea of what you can do to make yourself more marketable and competitive to this new audience. Hopefully, when you evaluated your career change plan, you were able to identify some skills or experience that you may have been lacking and can make sure to include ways to gain those in your action plan. It's also important that your action plan follows a logical order. Just like when you first began your current career field, you want to create some order to your career change action plan. You can't be expected to learn everything all at once, so you want to try to prioritize the things that you want to learn or gain, and then devise a plan that can help you tackle the essentials first, and then build on new skills and new experiences as you go along. It can often be helpful to start by building on the things you already know and making sure that you understand what should come first, second, third, and so on. You can save yourself some frustration by creating some ordered short-term steps to help you achieve your long-term goals. And then it's also really helpful to remind yourself that trying to bridge a large gap in skills or experience can be time consuming. And again, this in itself is not a problem so long as you're aware of the time and effort that might be required to make your goals a reality. If you need a new job immediately, perhaps because of a layoff, then you might want to have sort of an intermediate plan in place. It might be worth doing some research to see if there's sort of a stepping stone job, so to speak, that you could look for that might be easier to obtain than your ultimate career goal while still helping you get to that ultimate end goal. And as you're developing your action plan for how you will approach entering your new career field, you might realize that you need to start trying to find ways to build your skills and experience to make yourself a competitive candidate for these types of roles, especially if you're lacking essential experience. Volunteering might not be a relevant possibility for you depending on the career path you've selected, but it can be a great way to help you start applying new skills and building up your level of experience for jobs in a number of industries. So while not possible for all fields, it is worth considering and researching organizations that may be willing to take you on in a volunteer capacity so that you can start to generate experience and apply your skills in a way that will be more relevant to your new career of choice. This can also potentially give you material to include in a portfolio or provide you with an opportunity to discuss relevant skills and experiences both on your resume or during a job interview. And you might even already have connections with a nonprofit organization that you could leverage, but there are also websites available like idealist.org and volunteermatch.org where you can search for volunteer opportunities. So definitely consider that as an option. Another great way of gaining experience is a returnship or an adult internship. While you may think of internships as being solely for college students, there are some companies who offer adult internships and return to work programs for those who have already had some career experience. Returnships are very similar to internships, but they are typically reserved for individuals who have spent some time away from the workforce, perhaps to, care for a loved one or maybe raise their children. Either way, it can be helpful to pursue an internship, a development program, or a returnship with an organization in your new industry to help build experience and establish connections in this new field. So it's definitely something to consider adding to your action plan. Participating in a well-recognized internship or returnship program can not only gain you valuable experience, but can also make you more attractive to future employers once you have completed the program and added it to your resume. And if you perform well in a returnship or other development program, you might be able to build professional relationships with people who are then willing to serve as a reference for you as you apply to other roles. Additionally, these types of programs are usually designed to provide you with a wealth of applicable skills and knowledge in a short period of time, just like with more traditional internships, so they can quickly add a lot of professional value. As was mentioned when discussing evaluating your career change plan, you've hopefully identified some areas where you need to enhance existing skills or build new skills entirely. This is often referred to as upskilling, and it can be extremely helpful when you are trying to enter a new career field. Think about what skills are most essential to this new career path, and then maybe prioritize your list of skills that you want to develop. You can then conduct some research on courses, tutorials, trainings, and other opportunities to learn and enhance these skills, starting with the most important. In terms of the options that are available to help you with your upskilling, you can likely find a wealth of resources with a wide range of affordability options. A simple, search on the internet might yield free resources, free videos, tutorials, but there are also more structured and professional courses that you can take, including on websites like Coursera and Udemy and LinkedIn Learning, to learn new skills quickly and comprehensively. The skills you can build in these types of courses, when combined with the application of these skills through like volunteering or an internship or an intermediate job, can definitely add value to your resume. Other trainings, certifications, or degree programs can be costly and time consuming, which, as we've mentioned before, is not in itself an issue, but you should be prepared for this before diving in. Certain careers might require paid training and certification courses or even costly licensing exams, whereas others you might be able to learn through free resources. Either way, you want to make sure that you are analyzing the cost and time required versus the intended impact you are hoping that this career change will have on your professional life. If it seems like the cost of changing careers greatly outweighs the potential impact, you might need to go back and reconsider your career change plan. So our last topic for today, before moving into our Q&A portion, revolves around adjusting your job search tactics. Once you have decided to change careers, you've evaluated your career change plan, and you've developed your action plan to help you transition to this new role and work to gain some essential skills and experience, it's then time to put your plan into action and start searching for and applying jobs within your new field. To be perfectly candid, sometimes changing careers can be really difficult. It can take time to build up enough experience to be considered for higher level positions, and some employers might question your decision to change careers. That's not a reason to give up, but it's important to know that changing careers can be challenging, at least initially. Mentally preparing yourself for some of the challenges that you could encounter can make sure that you are better equipped to navigate those challenges as they arise. So as you continue trying to gain employment in your chosen career path, pay attention to what's working and what isn't, and then try to adapt your strategies as needed. You don't want to go with just one specific tactic and hope it works, but rather try to diversify your strategies. Some of the strategies that you want to employ, many of which you might have used before in the past, include using a variety of job titles and keywords to search and apply for jobs through job boards. You don't want to limit yourself necessarily to just job titles. You can also try searching by specific skills or competencies that you possess. You could also conduct a reverse job search where you research specific companies of interest and then examine open roles posted on their website until you find one that fits your interests. You could also attempt to network with other professionals in your new industry to potentially find jobs in the hidden job market. And then leveraging your own direct connections to help find potential job leads is also a valuable strategy to employ. All of these are good options to consider, and no single one of these options is the exact right approach each time. Because of this, you want to try multiple strategies simultaneously, and trying different strategies also means that some of your strategies will likely fail, but don't let that discourage you. This is the exact reason why it's best to try more than one approach so that you can maximize your chances of success. And unfortunately, failure is a natural part of the job search process. So try to mentally prepare yourself for that and kind of guard yourself against the negative feelings that can arise when you do experience failure. Regardless of what strategies you choose to pursue to obtain a new career, you want to make sure that you are highlighting your strengths. And this can take shape in a number of different ways. For some fields, this might mean creating a portfolio or linking samples of your work to your LinkedIn profile so that you are showing examples of the types of things that you can produce. Having past examples of your work to display to potential employers will give them more confidence that you can replicate that type of work for them in the future. And in fact, this is why a lot of professions are now including different types of assessments as part of their hiring process. It serves as sort of a prove it step in the process. So that's something you might encounter, and it's good to be prepared for that. For other fields where a portfolio isn't relevant, it can be helpful to identify a new person or two, perhaps from a volunteer experience or an internship, that can be added to your list of references. You want this to be someone who can vouch for the strengths that you possess that are going to be relevant to your new career field, as well as speak positively about your quality of work, your levels of professionalism, and other transferable skills that you are trying to emphasize and showcase. And it can even be a good idea to ask people to provide you with a recommendation on your LinkedIn profile, as more often than not, employers will review your LinkedIn profile before they ever reach out to your references. But no matter what field you are choosing to enter, you want to think about relevant examples and stories from your past work experience, volunteer opportunities, internships or returnships, and your upskilling efforts that you can include on your resume, write about in a cover letter, or discuss during an interview or during a networking conversation that will help you highlight your abilities and your achievements as they relate to your new field of interest. And as was touched on a bit earlier, you want to be thinking about your audience and make sure that you are providing details about yourself and what you bring to the table that are going to be important, relevant, and desirable to them. Lastly, this was touched on briefly in the previous slide, but I want to emphasize and explain this point in more detail, because tailoring the information you write about in a resume or a cover letter and the things you discuss in an interview for a given role is extremely important. For each job that you are considering applying to, you want to make sure that you are carefully paying attention to the position description. As you have likely heard in some of our other webinars, or maybe read about in some of our articles, applicant tracking systems are often used to scan resumes for keywords and phrases that are important to the role in question, and then they score or rank you based on the number of keywords your resume includes. In addition to that, recruiters and hiring managers are rarely reading resumes word for word, and at least during the first read through. So it's important to capture their attention quickly by incorporating key terms and phrases from from the job posting that are going to resonate with them and make them want to learn more about you. And since it can be cumbersome to revamp your entire resume for each application, it's often a good strategy to include a professional summary and key skills section at the top of your resume that you can then tailor for each position. Using these types of sections to incorporate specific keywords and phrases, mirroring the language used in the position description, can be highly effective in maximizing your chances of making it to the interview stage, and also focusing the bulk of your tailoring efforts on those sections, the professional summary and key skills section, can help you save a lot of time. And you'll actually see these types of sections included in the FlexJobs resume samples that are included in the resources tab of this webinar. These sections give you an effective place to focus those tailoring efforts and prevent you from having to create an entirely different resume each time you apply for a different job. And tailoring your resume, cover letter, and the examples to discuss in interviews isn't just important for the purposes of an applicant tracking system screening. It also helps your audience, meaning the hiring manager or recruiter, gain a more immediate sense of how you might be a good fit for this specific role. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to understand that you're a strong candidate for the position, rather than just hoping that they will magically understand that you're the best option from their pool of candidates. So try to make their job as easy as possible. And taking the time to tailor your application documents for each role does take time and can decrease the number of applications that you can submit in a given time period, but it also drastically increases the quality of each application and improves your chances of success. So try to focus on that more targeted, tailored, quality over quantity approach. All right, so before we close out, I will go ahead and recap the next steps for you to follow once you have decided to change careers and determined your new field of focus. So the first one there, evaluate your plan and think about your transferable skills and abilities. This also includes thinking about the skills or experience you might be lacking that can make you more attractive to future employers. Next there, develop a list of ways to further build your skills and experience. Make sure that the action plan you create for yourself has some tangible, achievable ways to gain and compensate for any potential deficits that you may currently have. Excuse me there. The next one, adjust your job search tactics and strategies. Once you've progressed through the early stages of your action plan and are ready to apply for jobs in your new career field, evaluate what's working and what isn't, and then adjust your strategies accordingly. And then lastly, tailor your application documents for specific roles. Pay attention to what your audience wants to see, review position descriptions carefully, incorporate keywords and phrases into your resume, and plan out the relevant things that you have done or learned that will resonate with your audience. Following these action steps can help you increase your chances of successfully changing your career and hopefully land you a position that will be more professionally fulfilling for you in the future. All right, so we are going to go ahead and close out our presentation and move into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. I want to remind you that a copy of the webinar recording, as well as some resources discussed during the presentation, will be emailed to you within the next week. Be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered out of your inbox. For even more tips, tricks, and resources, I recommend going to the FlexJobs blog. You can see the URL of the blog on the slide there. It includes a vast amount of free articles, resources, webinars, and videos for members and non-members alike. So now let's go ahead and open up to your questions. Please remember to type your questions in the Q&A area rather than the chat section, and feel free to give a thumbs up to anyone else's question that you'd also like to have answered so we know which questions are most popular. All right, everyone, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of the webinar today. Before we get started, could someone let me know in the chat section if you're able to hear me all right? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, my name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions today. So, our first question here is asking about an issue with the captioning. So, yes, the captioning tool that we use to create the subtitles for our presentations, sometimes they get a little confused if we aren't enunciating correctly. So, this person was mentioning the fact that they noticed that the script mentioned ONET as OwnNet, and they wanted to clarify that the correct name is ONET and the website address is www.ownetonline.org. Yes, you are correct. It is called ONET, and that is the URL. And actually, in the resources tab, you will see ONET Online as one of the resources there. So if you click open, you will be able to then access ONET, and never hurts to just kind of bookmark it so that you don't have to remember what the URL is every time. But yes, the captioning software sometimes can be frustrating for us. So I do appreciate you taking the time to clarify that for everyone. I also want to address, I saw someone put a question in the chat and I attempted to convert it to a Q&A, but I think I accidentally deleted it instead. They were asking about quality over quantity in terms of applications. I always recommend going with the quality approach over quantity. So, what I mean by that is make sure that you are taking the time with each job that you find and you want to apply to, taking the time to really thoroughly read that position description, get a good understanding of what that role entails, do some research into the company as well, and then make sure that you are tailoring both your resume and your cover letter appropriately to that specific job and that specific company. So, emphasizing certain responsibilities or accomplishments or skills that you've had or that you are, highly qualified in over other things to make sure that, the things that are most relevant about you and your experience are going to stand out. So I apologize that I accidentally deleted that one, but I did want to make sure to answer that question because it is really important. So thank you for asking that. Okay, our next one here is a question about finding trustworthy support groups of fellow job seekers. Yeah, finding support groups of other job seekers, people who are in similar positions to where you might be right now, is really beneficial because, job seeking is really stressful sometimes. It can be discouraging and demoralizing at times. So, having a support network can be really helpful. So, couple things there that I'll mention. There are different LinkedIn groups. So if you're active on LinkedIn, which I highly recommend that you should be, you could search for, job seekers in the search bar or career development. And then there will be a groups filter so that you can click on to then see groups related to those topics. So that could be a good place to find some of that helpful guidance and support. Even reaching out to folks in your own network, like anytime actually, I should say, early on in my career, when I found myself, either out of a job or maybe unsatisfied with the job that I had, I almost felt embarrassed by that, and so I wouldn't really reach out to my network. I didn't want to share that with the world. So, I made the mistake of kind of suffering by myself when I was job seeking. That's a mistake. When you are out of a job or unsatisfied with your current job, tell people that former colleagues, family, friends, other professionals that you've established relationships with. Let them know. Ask them if they have any advice, or even if they could just be, an ear to listen to your concerns and allow you to vent some of that discouragement that you might feeling. Because sometimes just getting that out can be really helpful. So that's another good way to try to find some support. Other job seekers in our webinars like to use the chat section almost as a support group. The chat today wasn't all that active, which is perfectly fine. I did see some good comments and suggestions and things like that from our attendees today. But I often will during our webinars see people express some of that frustration or ask questions of their fellow job seekers or give advice and support to their fellow job seekers. So it doesn't necessarily need to be an official support group. Just any anywhere that you can kind of tap into that support and that guidance and that advice, it can really help your mindset as you're going through your job search. And one other thing that I'll mention is, a lot of industries have professional associations that you can join. Sometimes it's free to join. Sometimes they have a due or a fee that you have to pay. So explore the different options that could be out there for your industry. But a lot of times those associations then on their websites will have online forums, or maybe they'll host events or networking opportunities. So you could look for associations that are related to your field of interest to maybe also get some of that support that you may be seeking. So hopefully that gives you some good options to work with, because again, I know job searching can be stressful and discouraging. So trying to find some ways that you can get some of that support, I think can be really helpful. So I appreciate you asking that question. Okay, so here's another good question related to some of that frustration and discouragement that we were talking about. So, this person was mentioning that some organizations have a really long interview process, and then sometimes it leads to failure at the end. You might have known that you were a final candidate, but you ended up not getting the position, and you might not have been applying for other positions during that time because you felt like you were so strong in the sort of candidate process. So my best advice for handling that type of situation is don't stop your job search until you have in writing accepted an offer. You always want to make sure that you are continuing along in your job search, because sometimes there are situations where we feel like we are a shoe in and we are going to get the job, and then we don't. That has happened to me before. I've made that mistake before, where I was in a months long interview process. I felt like I was doing really well. I knew I was one of the final candidates. And then I got that email saying, hey, we really liked you, but we decided to go with somebody else. And it can be crushing. So you don't want to, as the saying goes, put all your eggs in one basket. Even if you feel like you have a good thing coming along and you might get an offer, continue your job search, continue interviewing with other organizations, submitting those quality applications that we talked about. Don't stop doing that until you have an offer in writing and you have accepted that offer in writing. And another good reason why you would want to do that is sometimes you can use that offer. Like, let's say hypothetically, you're moving along in this process, you're a top candidate, you end up getting an offer, and then you end up getting another offer as well. You then have the option to kind of review both those offers, see which one's going to be the best for you, maybe even leverage those offers against one another in the salary negotiation process as well. You'd want to do so tactfully. You would want to say, hey, I really am excited about this opportunity. I do have this other offer though that would make more financial sense for my future, and I'm really kind of torn. Is there any wiggle room with the salary that you've offered me? So that could be another way to kind of use that to your advantage. But the main point here is, do not stop job searching and applying for jobs and interviewing for jobs until you have that offer in writing. So hopefully that was helpful for you, and thank you for asking that. Okay, so another good question here. How do you approach getting a reference for a new career, or when you're pivoting there? So I believe I'm understanding you. I think that you mean, how do you, if you're making a career change, how do you ask someone to be a reference for you? I hope I'm understanding that question clearly. So what I always do when I am, setting up my references when I'm in the job search, first and foremost, I let them know well ahead. So I tell them in advance, like, hey, here's my situation. I'm about to start searching for jobs. Could I please use you as a reference? Hopefully, they then say yes. Once they say yes, I say, just as a heads up, these are the types of positions that I'm looking for. So if you were to be contacted, it would be great if you could speak to my ability to do these types of things. So trying to kind of prepare them ahead of time, what it is I'm looking for, the types of skills and experiences and abilities that I would want them to talk about if they were contacted for a reference. So, they might not be able to speak to everything that you can do if you're making a career change, but giving them that heads up, letting them know, please speak to my ability to do these types of things can help you, make sure that they are going to be a solid reference for you. Now, if your question was not referring to that and you were instead asking about, maybe reaching out to someone to get some information about a career change or pivoting, that can be a little bit easier almost. You're just reaching out to folks that maybe they're people that are doing the types of things that you want to be doing. In those situations, I will kind of reach out to someone and demonstrate that, I acknowledge that they have a wealth of experience, a lot of wisdom to share, and ask them if I could just simply maybe pick their brain or ask them some questions for a few minutes. So just being polite and respectful, kind of giving an easy ask like, hey, I just want to ask you a few questions. It'll only take a few minutes, so that it's more likely that they'll say yes. That's a good way to get someone in your network to help you as you're trying to make these decisions in your potential career change. So hopefully one of those two answers was helpful for your question. But my apologies that I was not 100% clear on what you were asking there. Okay, so our next question here, how much time does it take to return back to the same career, provided that you changed careers in between after a gap of 1.5 years after upskilling yourself? So, good question, little tricky to answer. The average job search does take about 6 to 8 months. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. There's a lot of variables that can impact it. So one of the things, if you so in this scenario, you switched careers at some point a while ago in your career, you now want to switch back to your previous field, but you've had a gap, you have taken some time to upskill yourself. So you're doing some good things here. The fact that you took time to upskill yourself, that's going to show your commitment and your dedication to returning to this previous field. So that's a good thing. I would make sure in your career break entry on your resume that you are mentioning that you took this time to upskill yourself. And let me pause there for a second and point you to the resources tab of this webinar. Within the resources tab, that first one there that says samples, templates, and scripts, within there are examples of how you could put career breaks and employment gaps on your resume. So I just wanted to mention that that can help you, tactfully explain why you were out of the workforce, and also show you some ways that you can leverage that career break entry to emphasize that you've been upskilling and trying to prepare yourself for this return to your previous career. So that's a big step in that process. I would also make sure that in your cover letter and in your interviews that you are emphasizing the why behind this return to your same career. Make sure that you are highlighting what it is that you miss about working in that field, the skills that you have from working in that field, as well as from your upskilling that will make your return successful or allow you to be successful back in that previous field. That's all important. Also, in your resume, make sure that you are referencing or listing that previous experience that you have. That's going to be helpful. You want to show that relevant experience. If it was beyond 10 to 15 years ago that you had this experience, you do want to, be mindful of potential issues related to ageism. So you could craft a section on your resume that's called, additional related experience, where you include some of those earlier jobs, but maybe omit the dates for when you held those jobs to try to avoid issues related to ageism. So hopefully there were some good tips there to get you started on making that transition back to your previous career. But very good question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so good question here with our next one. A couple things to unpack. So I'm going to read this question in full. So this person is saying that some employers won't consider an applicant if you haven't officially held the title they want, and some consider entry level jobs to mean that you already have 2 years of experience in that role. That is very frustrating. You're absolutely right. It's incredibly maddening when companies do that. Volunteering for this long isn't always possible. I get ghosted a lot. Is the ATS kicking me out before a human sees me? Any recommendation? So, couple things here, lot to unpack, like we mentioned. So totally frustrating. Like I said, if they want a specific job title, or they want that 2 years or plus for an entry level role. One of the things that you can do, actually, let me jump to one of your other questions here first. So the ATS is not kicking you out. It doesn't like remove people from the candidate pool. What applicant tracking systems do is it's kind of an organization device that employers use. So some applicant tracking systems will screen your application materials for keywords and phrases and then kind of rank you among other candidates. So that way the hiring manager, when they look to see, everyone that submitted an application, they can kind of see who was ranked the highest, and they're probably going to pay them closer attention than other people. But it's not kicking you out. Humans will be still looking at your application materials, but sometimes they're influenced by that ranking. So, because of that, what you really want to do, you want to leverage keywords. So let's say let's stick with the job title part here. I often recommend to job seekers that on your resume you have a little tagline at the top of your resume where you use the exact job title listed in that position description. That way, even if you haven't held that title, the ATS, if it's screening, it'll pick up on that as a keyword. The recruiter or hiring manager, when they're skimming initially for keywords, they're going to see that. They'll be more open and accepting to your application materials. So that could be helpful for you. But then also in that position description, or from that position description, I should say, scan through it, read it really thoroughly, try to identify other integral skills, responsibilities, accomplishments, keywords, phrases, and incorporate them into your resume and your cover letter. That's the quality over quantity approach that we mentioned earlier. So even though you might be missing that direct experience, focus on what you do have from that job description and make sure that you are emphasizing it in your application materials. You still might find employers that say, oh, this person's never held this exact job before, or oh, they don't have the 2 years of experience for this entry level role. You might still encounter that. It's not going to guarantee you that you'll make it farther in the process, but it is going to increase your chances. At the same time, you mentioned that volunteering that long for, 2 years isn't always possible. Do still look for ways to gain some more experience. Maybe if you are currently employed, you could find some projects that you could pick up after, talking to your supervisor. You could pick up some projects that will help gain a little bit more of that experience. You could still try to look for volunteer roles where you are doing that type of work, even though it's not going to be 2 years worth of that work. You could still be trying to do some upskilling to help you gain more of those skills. That 2 years of experience that employers might list as being preferred on a resume aren't necessarily 2 consecutive years in one specific position. It can be a combination of a lot of different things. So try to frame it as though you have that experience from these 5 or 6 different experiences. Together combined, that might get you closer to that 2 years of experience. So that would be my best recommendation there. A lot of stuff to unpack. I believe I addressed it all, and hopefully that was helpful for you. Okay, so we are a bit over our time here, 2 or 3 minutes over time. So we're going to go ahead and draw to a close. I know we did not get to everyone's question today, and I do apologize for that. Really appreciate, though, you all taking the time to be here. I appreciate your thoughtful questions, the engagement in the chat. That's always great to see. I hope sincerely that this webinar and the Q&A were both helpful for you. I do definitely encourage you to continue keeping an eye out for upcoming events that we have. We do host weekly Q&As. Typically, they are Wednesday afternoons, where you just have 30 minutes to ask questions. So if you didn't get a question answered and you want to try coming to the Q&A later today, please feel free to do that. Again, really hope this was helpful for you all. Appreciate you taking the time to be here, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.